It was the kind of sound that shatters a parent's soul, a gunshot, sharp and surreal, followed by the piercing scream of a child. I didn't see it happen. I wasn't even facing her. I was helping another neighbor move a car away from a hydrant when the drill began. But I heard it. Every fiber in my body knew it was her, Lily, my daughter, 9 years old, gentle, brave, slower than the rest, but fighting every day to keep up with a world that didn't wait for girls with braces on their legs. I dropped everything and ran. People were frozen, some staring, others shouting. The street outside our HOA's community hall was a blur of movement. Orange cones, smoke machines, HOA volunteers in reflective vests pretending to care about safety. And in the middle of it all, Lily was on the ground, her tiny body curled up near the edge of the sidewalk, her blue dress stained with something I hadn't seen on her since her birth, blood. Time slowed. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled before I even reached her. Rachel, my wife, was already screaming, her hands trembling as she pressed them to our daughter's stomach, trying to stop the bleeding. She didn't move fast enough. Someone whispered behind me. Margot thought she was ignoring the drill. That name, Margot Ellison, burned into my brain like acid. Head of the HOA Safety Committee. The same woman who once fined us for having a discolored mailbox while Lily was in the hospital recovering from surgery. The same woman who told everyone that safety rules had to apply even to the weak. The police arrived within minutes, but it felt like hours. Officer Reyes tried to pull me back, tried to tell me to give space for the EMTs, but I couldn't let go. Not yet. Lily's fingers were gripping mine, faintly, weakly. She was trying to say something, but her lips were trembling. She looked scared, not from the pain, but from the confusion. Like she didn't understand why someone would do this. Neither did I. And there she was, Margot, standing just a few yards away, her gun on the pavement, hands raised as if she was the victim. She didn't look remorseful. She looked irritated, like we had interrupted her drill. She didn't comply. She muttered when Officer Reyes cuffed her. Everyone else evacuated on time, as if my daughter's life was just a failed checkbox on her clipboard, as if Lily's limp was an inconvenience, not a reality. I could hear the medics yelling for more pressure, for clearance to move. Rachel was shaking, whispering, "Stay with us," over and over again. I didn't even notice I was bleeding myself from where I'd fallen, from where I'd punched the pavement. Maybe I didn't care. All I saw was Lily, her soft curls matted with sweat and smoke, her eyes fluttering shut, and Margot, that monster in a floral cardigan, being escorted past us, chin high, muttering something about legal rights and liability waivers. That's when I knew this was an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a war. A war against indifference, against cruelty disguised as order, against people who believe that rules are more sacred than children. The ambulance doors slammed shut. I wasn't allowed to ride with them. They said I was too agitated, too aggressive. Maybe I was. Maybe I would have torn that whole HOA to the ground if they hadn't held me back. But I wasn't a threat. I was a father whose daughter had been gunned down during a fake emergency by a woman who thought her speed didn't meet code. And now I'm going to tell you the full story, because people need to know what really happened in Willow Creek Estates that day. Not the watered-down HOA report, not the sanitized police summary. The truth, from the beginning, from the moment we moved into the moment the first shot changed everything. When we first moved to Willow Creek Estates, I thought we'd found our little piece of heaven. It was quiet, clean, full of smiling neighbors who waved as you drove by. A row of white-fenced homes, each with trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, and enough artificial charm to make you forget how artificial it really was. We'd moved from a cramped apartment on the other side of town because Lily needed space, real space, a backyard where she could run without bumping into furniture, streets where cars didn't fly by at 60 miles an hour, a place that felt safe. Rachel loved the house. She decorated it with sunflowers and lavender even before the boxes were unpacked. Lily picked her room. The one with the bay window overlooking the oak tree and filled it with sketchbooks, storybooks, and her favorite stuffed animal, a faded bunny she called Captain Hop. She was happy. We were happy. And for a while, I let myself believe we'd finally made it. Then came Margot Ellison. The HOA welcomed us with a slim folder of rules and a thick smile for Margot. She was tall, in her early 50s, with hair that never moved and eyes that never blinked. The kind of person who signed emails with warmest regards while filing fines for overgrown grass. "We run a tight ship here," she told me on day one. "It's what keeps property values high and residents responsible." She wasn't joking. At first, it was small things. A warning letter because our trash bins weren't pulled in within the 2-hour window. A citation because Lily had chalked on the sidewalk. Graffiti, Margot called it. But I let it slide. We were new. Maybe she was just doing her job. That's what I kept telling myself, even when she left a laminated flyer in our mailbox labeled Mobility Awareness and HOA Expectations. It was clearly aimed at us. You see, Lily was born with a neuromuscular condition. She could walk, even run for short bursts, but she moved slower than most kids. She wore a supportive leg brace on her left side, and sometimes used a walking stick when she was tired, but she never complained. Not once. In fact, she was more determined than most adults I've known. She got up early to do her stretches, practiced climbing stairs when no one was watching. She was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, except Margot. I remember one afternoon during the neighborhood's summer barbecue, Lily tripped over a lawn marker. It wasn't serious, just a scrape, but Margot's reaction still haunts me. She leaned over with this fake concern and said, perhaps she'd be better off inside, where things are a little more manageable. Rachel froze. I clenched my fists. Lily just nodded and smiled, like she didn't hear the insult. But I did. And from that moment on, I knew we were being watched, judged. The fire drills started 6 months later. Margot spearheaded the Willow Creek Emergency Preparedness Initiative after a tree branch knocked out power for 1 hour during a rainstorm. Suddenly, we had monthly safety alerts, neighborhood-wide disaster simulations, and mandatory evacuation protocols, all led by Margot, wearing her neon vest and barking instructions into a megaphone like she was commanding troops in a war zone. At first, it seemed like an overreaction, but then we realized it was personal. Every time Lily lagged behind, even by a few seconds, Margot would mark it down. Non-compliant. She once muttered loud enough for Rachel to hear. Another time, she called me after a drill to suggest we invest in a personal mobility scooter for Lily to ensure the neighborhood's safety record stayed intact. I hung up on her, but it didn't stop. Margot saw Lily's pace as a threat, a liability, a flaw in her perfect little simulation. And no matter how many times I explained Lily's condition, no matter how hard my daughter tried, it was never enough. Rachel wanted to file a formal complaint. But who would we file it to? Margot practically was the HOA. The president, Martin Glade, was more of a puppet than a leader. Every vote went her way. Every issue disappeared into her polite but sharp emails. The neighbors were divided. Some agreed with us, whispered their support when no one was around. Others sided with Margot. Rules are rules, they'd say. It's not personal. But it was personal, and it was building toward something. Lily never showed it, but I could see the pressure wearing on her. She'd start practicing for the drills the night before, laying out her sneakers, timing herself, walking from her room to the porch, holding her breath when the alarm sounded. She just wanted to be like everyone else. To not be the girl who made the drills take longer. To not be the reason Margot's clipboard had another check mark. Then one day, I caught her crying in her room. Captain Hop lay on the floor, his ear torn. I asked what was wrong, and she just whispered, "I'll never be fast enough, Daddy. She hates me." That night, something inside me cracked. I wanted to pull up stakes and leave, but we couldn't afford to move again. So I promised her I'd protect her. I always would. I didn't know I was making a promise I couldn't keep. 2 weeks before the shooting, the HOA sent out a notice, full fire drill simulation, mandatory attendance, emergency response assessment. Margot's name was bolded at the top, along with the words final phase test. I didn't like the tone. Neither did Rachel. This isn't a drill, she said. It's a test. A test of what, though? We had no idea how far Margot was willing to go. Jenna Park, our next-door neighbor and a quiet tech analyst who rarely got involved, approached me the day before the drill. She said she'd noticed something disturbing during the last HOA meeting, something she'd recorded on her phone. Margot was talking about accountability enforcement and how non-compliant parties will be formally marked and removed from future simulations. Jenna didn't know what it meant, but she looked worried. I think she's talking about Lily, she said. You need to be careful. She was right, but by then it was too late. The morning of the fire drill began with a silence I didn't trust. Rachel was packing Lily's lunch, humming softly under her breath, trying to act like it was a normal Tuesday. But I knew she wasn't at ease. Neither was I. Lily sat at the kitchen table with her leg brace already fastened, her shoes laced tight, and her watch timer blinking red. She was ready, or at least trying to be, but her eyes didn't lie. She was scared. I sat down beside her and gently placed my hand over hers. It's just another drill, I said. We'll be right there with you. She nodded but didn't speak. Captain Hop sat in her lap, freshly stitched where Rachel had sewn the ear back on. That bunny had been through everything: surgeries, school bullies, hospital nights, and now he was her quiet armor. I hated that she needed it. At 8:45 a.m., Rachel received the HOA's final reminder email. The subject line read, Mandatory compliance, Phase 3 simulation today at 4 p.m. Attached was a PDF with a floor plan of the neighborhood, designated evacuation zones, and new response timing metrics for each household. Margot had gone too far. There were columns for time of evacuation, distance to assembly point, and the most disturbing delay cause, if any. I called Officer Reyes. I'd spoken to him before about Margot's obsessive behavior. He was kind, but limited. It's a drill, Daniel, he said. She's not breaking any laws. Technically. But even he sounded unsure. Keep your daughter close. I'll be in the area just in case. Just in case. Around noon, Jenna came to our porch. She looked pale. Margot sent this to the HOA board, she whispered, handing me a printed memo. I scanned it, my stomach twisting. It was titled Individual Risk Ratings. Each family had a score. Ours? Yellow, at risk due to dependent mobility. Next to Lily's name, Margot had written, requires intervention if delay exceeds threshold. No explanation. No details. Rachel read it over my shoulder and whispered, she's going to do something. I looked at the clock. 3 hours until the drill. And I couldn't stop what was coming. We kept Lily home from school that day. She practiced walking from the living room to the curb again and again. She timed herself, drank water, asked if the fire drill would have real smoke. Maybe I told her, but it won't be scary. Just pretend it's a game. But this wasn't a game. Not to Margot. At 3:55 p.m., the HOA siren blared through the neighborhood, an ugly, too loud sound that made Lily jump. Rachel grabbed her backpack. I took her hand. Neighbors were already streaming out of their homes in bright vests and color-coded hats. Zone red, zone blue, zone green. Margot had turned our street into a tactical map. The streets were blocked off. Smoke machines puffed near the hydrants. Volunteers shouted instructions. And there she was, Margot Ellison, standing in front of the main assembly zone like a general inspecting her troops. She held a clipboard in one hand, a megaphone in the other. Her vest was bright yellow, her lips painted with precision. Cold, efficient. She scanned the crowd like she was waiting to catch someone failing. We were in zone red. We were supposed to make it to the Central Park lot within 90 seconds. I carried Lily's emergency tag. Rachel had our family's wristbands. We walked at Lily's pace. She was doing her best, breathing hard but steady. Then, halfway down the block, Margot noticed us. She turned, pointed, and said into her megaphone, Household 14B, your child is outside of the response window. That is non-compliant behavior. You were informed of the timing thresholds. The crowd went quiet. Lily stopped. She looked up at me. "I'm trying, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm going faster." "You're doing great," I told her. "Ignore her. Keep moving." Rachel was furious. "Margot, she's a child," she shouted. "You're not the police." Margot didn't even flinch. "Safety drills are only effective if everyone participates equally," she replied coldly. "No exceptions. If she cannot comply, she endangers the group." Endangers the group. That phrase snapped something in me. I stepped forward, ready to shout, to curse, to tear her goddamn clipboard in half. But before I could say a word, she reached into her jacket and pulled out the gun. At first, no one moved. No one believed it was real. She held it low, at her side, calm, calculated. "If this were a real emergency," she said through the megaphone, "any delay would be fatal. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made." Then she raised it. I don't remember screaming, but Rachel did, and Lily as she froze. 1 second, we were walking toward a stupid fake safety zone. The next, my daughter was on the ground, her dress soaked in red. I heard the shot, but I didn't feel it until I saw her fall. Until I saw Captain Hop lying beside her, his white fur splattered with blood. That's when the world stopped. People screamed. Volunteers dropped their clipboards. Someone tackled Margot from behind. I think it was Jenna. Officer Reyes came out of nowhere, his gun drawn, shouting at everyone to get down. But I didn't hear any of it. I only saw Lily, my baby girl, curled on the concrete, eyes wide, not blinking. I ran to her. Rachel was already kneeling, sobbing, pressing her hands to the wound. Lily was trying to speak, trying to breathe, and in the chaos, as officers swarmed and sirens wailed and neighbors stood frozen in disbelief, I saw Margot being cuffed, still calm, still collected, as if what she'd done was just another item on her agenda. She failed to evacuate, she said, almost to herself. Like Lily was a number, not a child, not my daughter. The ride to the hospital was a blur of red lights, blood-stained hands, and prayers I hadn't said since Afghanistan. I wasn't allowed in the ambulance. Rachel went with Lily, holding pressure to the wound the whole way. I drove behind them, running every red light, cursing every slow car, begging God with every breath, "Don't take her. Please, not her." When I reached the ER, a nurse stopped me at the desk. "Are you the father?" she asked. I couldn't speak, just nodded. She led me through double doors, down a hall that smelled like antiseptic and fear. When I saw Lily unconscious, pale, hooked up to tubes, I lost it. Rachel was in the corner, her hands still stained, whispering to herself. She didn't look up. She couldn't. Dr. Rivers, the trauma specialist, met me outside the room. "The bullet missed her spine," she said softly, "but it tore through soft tissue. She's in surgery now. We're doing everything we can." I asked if she would walk again. She didn't answer. Back at Willow Creek, the neighborhood was already on fire, not with flames, but with chaos. Police cars surrounded the HOA building. Reporters had shown up by nightfall. The story spread fast. Child shot during suburban fire drill. The words looked surreal on TV, like some sick satire. But it was real. And then came the spin. Margot's attorney issued a statement by midnight. My client acted within the framework of a simulated emergency response and believed a threat was imminent. She pleaded not guilty to attempted manslaughter. Her defense? Miscommunication during a high-stress drill. It was a lie, a dangerous rehearsed lie, and the HOA? They backed her, at least publicly. Martin Glade, the coward of a president, held a press conference with trembling hands. The HOA does not condone violence, he read from a paper, but acknowledges the importance of security training in unpredictable scenarios. As if that explained anything. As if Lily was collateral damage in a simulation. The community split in two. Some neighbors dropped flowers at her door. Others avoided eye contact. One woman even messaged Rachel, "So sorry, but we still support the HOA's safety policies." I wanted to throw a brick through their perfect windows. Jenna, bless her, uploaded the full HOA meeting recordings to YouTube. In them, Margot could be heard discussing removing variables and identifying behavioral obstacles. She never said Lily's name, but everyone knew who she meant. The comments exploded. So did the outrage. But Margot? She was released on bail the next day. She went home, slept in her bed, while my daughter lay in a sterile hospital room fighting for her future. I barely ate. Rachel didn't sleep. The nurses were kind, but the silence in that room was unbearable. I sat next to Lily's bed every hour, watching her chest rise and fall, her tiny hand limp beneath the blanket. Her stuffed bunny, Captain Hop, sat by the pillow. I washed the blood off it myself in the men's bathroom. Took me an hour. I scrubbed until my fingers bled. By day 3, the headlines began to twist. One outlet asked, was it a tragic accident or failure to comply? Another ran a poll, should HOA emergency leaders be armed? And that's when I realized they weren't just trying to defend her, they were trying to erase Lily. I wouldn't let them. I went public. I stood in front of the hospital, cameras flashing, and told the world who my daughter was, how strong she was, how much she fought just to walk, to play, to live. I described how Margot had harassed us for months, how the HOA allowed it, how no child should fear being shot for not moving fast enough. The video went viral. Support poured in from around the country. Veterans groups, disability rights activists, parents of special needs kids. We received thousands of messages, offers to pay medical bills, letters from people who had lived under the tyranny of people like Margot. The wave of humanity gave us strength, but none of it healed Lily. The doctors removed the bullet fragments on day 5. They said she'd survive, but her recovery would be long, painful, and she might never run again. Rachel cried in the elevator for 10 straight minutes after they told us. I didn't cry. Not yet, because I wasn't done fighting. I wanted Margot in prison. Not a fine. Not probation. Prison. I wanted her to feel what we felt. Helplessness, fear, rage. I wanted to stand in court and watch the judge read out a sentence that said, "You are no longer welcome in this world of decent people." But the legal process was slow. Too slow. And Margot? She held a neighborhood unity gathering in her backyard just a week later, smiling for cameras, serving lemonade, calling it healing through community. Healing? She put my daughter in a hospital bed. That's not healing. That's hell. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, in soul. The walls were beige. The chairs were plastic. It smelled like floor wax and dust. But what chilled me was how easily everyone seemed to forget. Forget that my daughter had almost died. Margot Ellison walked in like she was arriving at a school board meeting. Calm, confident, her cardigan perfectly pressed. Not a trace of remorse in her expression. I watched her scan the room, eyes resting on the jury box, then on the cameras lined up in the back. She didn't look at me. Not once. Rachel squeezed my hand. She wore all black, not for mourning, but for war. Lily wasn't in court. She couldn't be. She was still recovering from her 3rd surgery. She asked me the night before, "Will she go to jail, Daddy?" I told her, "That's not up to me, but I'll do everything I can." And I meant it. The prosecution laid out everything: the video footage, Margot's own emails, the HOA memos, the recordings Jenna had captured. The jury heard Margot say, "If someone's not fast enough, they're a liability." They saw the gun, the clipboard, the cruelty. They saw the way she turned a fire drill into a punishment. The defense clung to procedure. She believed there was danger. She was simulating crisis conditions. She didn't intend to harm anyone. But intentions don't stop bullets. They don't erase scars. They don't fix the way Lily winces when she hears sirens now. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand, looked the jury in the eye, and told them what they weren't going to see on evidence slides. I told them about the night Lily was born, how her heartbeat slowed, how she came into the world fighting. I told them about her leg brace, her surgeries, her stubborn courage. I told them about how she used to draw chalk flowers on our sidewalk before Margot called it vandalism. Then I told them about the fire drill. I described the moment she was shot, The sound, the blood, the way her body folded onto the pavement like a story being ripped in half. I told them about washing her stuffed bunny in the men's bathroom, scrubbing my daughter's blood out of polyester fur. And finally, I looked at Margot. Directly. You didn't see a child, I said. You saw a number, a delay, an inconvenience. And you punished her for it. She didn't flinch. When I stepped down, I didn't look back. I couldn't. Rachel spoke next. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. But her words hit harder than anything I could have said. She called my daughter a threat. My daughter, who still gives her favorite toy to scared kids in the hospital. My daughter, who still asked if Margot was okay after she woke up in the ICU. The courtroom was silent when she finished. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 long, silent, aching days. When the verdict came in, my chest felt like it would explode. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on the charge of felony assault with a deadly weapon, resulting in grievous bodily harm. There were more words, legal terms, sentencing recommendations, but all I heard was guilty. Margot didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, lips pursed, like she'd been fined for a parking ticket. The judge sentenced her to 9 years in prison. Not enough, maybe, but enough to keep her away from other children. Enough to send a message. The reporters outside called it justice. I didn't. Justice would have been Lily walking without pain. Justice would have been never needing this trial in the first place. But it was something. And in a world that had treated my daughter like a checkbox, something mattered. People think the story ends when the verdict is read. It doesn't. The day Margot Ellison was taken away in handcuffs, the cameras packed up, the neighbors retreated behind their trimmed hedges, and the HOA issued a carefully worded apology to the Carter family and the entire Willow Creek community. But apologies don't fix nerve damage. They don't erase the image of your daughter lying in a hospital bed with tubes in her chest and fear in her eyes. The real story, the hard part, began after the courtroom went quiet. We brought Lily home a week after the sentencing. The doctors warned us she'd need intensive physical therapy for months, maybe years. She was quiet on the drive back, holding Captain Hop in one hand and her mother's fingers in the other. Our house, the place we once called home, didn't feel the same. It felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had been holding their breath this whole time. Lily didn't want to sleep in her own bed that night. She asked if she could stay in ours. So we made space. We lay beside her, watching the soft rise and fall of her chest. And sometime around 2 a.m., I heard her whisper, "Am I broken now?" Rachel cried in the dark. I couldn't find the words to answer. The weeks that followed were filled with physical therapists, quiet tears, and strange visitors. Reporters still camped out on the edge of the neighborhood. Some neighbors dropped by with cookies, casseroles, even gift cards, but their faces always carried that look. The one people where, when they're not sure if they're comforting you or themselves. And then there were the others, the ones who avoided us in the grocery store. The ones who said things like, "It's terrible what happened, but maybe the HOA should have had better training." Or worse, the ones who still called her Karen, like it was just a meme, like she hadn't pulled a trigger. Lily started having nightmares. Sometimes she'd wake up screaming. Other times, she'd sleepwalk, whispering the countdown from a fire drill in her sleep. 3, 2, 1. Rachel started sleeping with her arm around Lily every night. And I started walking the neighborhood again. Every night, I'd circle the block, past the HOA building, past Margot's empty house, past the sidewalk where it happened. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a ghost, maybe closure. Maybe just the proof that it all really happened, that I wasn't living in a nightmare I hadn't woken up from. Eventually, Lily asked the question I'd been dreading. "Can we move?" I looked at Rachel. She looked at me. We didn't say anything that night. But 2 months later, we put the house up for sale. The new place was smaller, quieter, no HOA, no drills, no meetings, just a garden, a school nearby, and a street where Lily could walk as slow as she wanted. She started smiling again. Not every day, but some days. She still limps. The doctors say she always will. But she laughs at jokes again, draws flowers again, sleeps through the night again. And when she took her first 5 steps in therapy without her brace, she looked at me and said, "I'm not broken, Daddy." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. You'd think a prison sentence would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Margot Ellison may have been locked away, but the system that let her rise, control, and nearly kill still stood. Willow Creek's HOA didn't dissolve. The board still operated. The rules remained. And while the community stayed quiet for a while, I could feel the whispers returning. About us. About Lily. About how the incident had damaged the neighborhood's reputation. The media didn't stop either. For weeks, talk shows debated everything from gun control in private communities to the legal authority of HOAs. One headline stuck in my head: "Are neighborhood watch programs becoming too militant?" Another posed the question I had screamed silently for months: what happens when safety becomes tyranny? I was invited to speak on several national shows. I declined all of them except one. PBS reached out for a long-form interview. No sensationalism, no shouting, just questions. I agreed and they flew me out. The host, a soft-spoken woman named Caroline Finch, asked me things that no one else dared. "What do you believe failed your daughter the most?" I didn't hesitate. "Cowardice," I said. Everyone saw what Margot was becoming. No one stopped her. Not the board. Not the neighbors. Not the law. People watched a woman spiral into obsession, and they let her hide behind rules and bylaws. She nodded, then asked, "And you? What have you learned?" I paused. That pain doesn't always end with justice. Sometimes it just gets quieter. After that aired, the civil rights groups came knocking. A disability rights organization, Access First, offered to represent us in a civil lawsuit against the HOA. Their lawyers reviewed everything: the emails, the drill policies, the memos, the individual risk ratings. They called it what I couldn't: systemic discrimination. Rachel was hesitant. She wanted to move on. But I wasn't done. Not yet. So we filed. The Carter Family versus Willow Creek Homeowners Association. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about setting a legal precedent that HOA policies are not above humanity and no child should be treated like a threat because of how they walk. The process was slow, grueling, bureaucratic. We had to relive it all again. The pictures, the medical charts, the drill, blueprints. But something different happened this time. More families came forward. A woman from another state shared that her autistic son had been forced to leave a community that required immediate verbal compliance during drills. Another father told me his daughter, who had epilepsy, was fined repeatedly for unapproved service animal behavior during HOA events. They weren't just stories. They were proof. This wasn't about one woman. It was about the culture that empowered her. The case caught national attention again. This time, the conversation changed. Lawmakers began proposing regulations to limit HOA authority, especially over emergency response policies and accessibility rights. And people started asking better questions, not just how did this happen, but how many others have we ignored? As for Lily, she followed every development with wide, serious eyes. She'd ask me, "Did the judge say anything today, or will they stop doing drills like that forever?" I never promised her yes, but I promised her this: we would try. By the end of the year, we settled the case. The HOA paid damages, not nearly enough, and was forced to issue a public admission of liability for failing to safeguard the rights of vulnerable residents. They also had to adopt new compliance policies, accessibility training, and a permanent ban on weapons during all future community events. It wasn't justice, but it was a start. And then came the letter. From prison. Margot, written in cold, even script, as if she were still filling out an HOA form. I maintain that I acted within my duty to protect this community. However, I acknowledge the pain it has caused. I regret that a child was injured. I hope you and your daughter find peace. No apology. No guilt. Just cold bureaucracy wrapped in formal regret. I didn't respond. I burned the letter. Because peace doesn't come from monsters like her. It comes from the strength of survivors. And Lily? She's still fighting, still walking, still healing. It's been 1 year, 12 months since the fire drill that changed everything. A year since the clipboard, the stopwatch, the shot. A year since my daughter stopped being seen as a child and became a headline. And today, for the first time, she ran. Not far, just across the small yard behind our new house. It was uneven and full of weeds, the kind of yard the old HOA would have fined us for. But to Lily, it was perfect. She laughed, really laughed, that full-bellied, shoulder-shaking sound I hadn't heard since before everything went wrong. She dropped Captain Hop in the grass and turned back to look at me, her arms out, her hair flying. I made it to the tree in 22 seconds, she shouted. I timed her anyway, 26, but I didn't correct her. I just smiled and shouted back, new record. Rachel watched from the porch, her hands wrapped around a mug. She doesn't cry as much anymore. But sometimes, like now, her eyes shimmer for no reason at all. We didn't rebuild our lives. We built new ones. There's a difference. Lily goes to a new school now, one that understands accessibility without needing a lawyer. She's made a friend, a girl named Zoe, who uses a hearing aid and carries a sketchbook everywhere. They sit together at lunch. They build stories together. Sometimes I peek through her bedroom door and hear them giggling about nothing. It's the best sound in the world. As for me, I still walk the neighborhood, sometimes, not Willow Creek. I haven't been back, but I walk, past kids riding bikes, past neighbors mowing lawns, and I think about how quickly safety can turn into cruelty when the wrong person holds the rules, how easy it is for control to wear the mask of community. People ask me what I'd say to Margot if I could. I tell them I already said it in court, in interviews, in policy changes, in the lives we helped protect afterward. But if she asked me now, really asked me what she took from us, I'd tell her, you didn't just fire a bullet. You fired a warning shot to the whole country. And this time, the whole world heard it. Because what happened to Lily isn't rare. Children are dismissed every day because they walk too slow, speak too soft, look too different, live outside the lines of what others find acceptable. And every time that happens, another Margot is born. So, no, this isn't just a story about an HOA drill gone wrong. This is a story about what happens when power forgets to be human. About what happens when we let silence protect the loudest bully in the room. But most of all, this is a story about Lily, who still walks, still laughs, still dreams, and who, against every odd, made it to the tree in 26 seconds. And that's the only ending that matters. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or made you cry, if you've ever felt powerless in the face of unfair authority, then you're not alone. Here on the HOA Stories, we bring you real, raw, emotional tales from the dark side of suburban control and the brave families who stood up and said, enough. Subscribe to the HOA Stories. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. Like, share, and help us protect every child, every neighbor, every voice they tried to silence.